It's time to break down the Buffalo Bills' Week 14 opponent, the challenges they present, and what the Bills need to do to deal with them today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Happy Wednesday to you, and thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day. And as a reminder to you, we are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. It's BetOnline, and it's where the game starts. Well, folks, it's time to get ready for another matchup against the Jets. The Bills looking to avenge their loss from a couple of weeks ago. And so we're going to do our primer preview. But since we've already done the full deep dive, it's going to be a little bit different. I want to focus our conversation today on the dynamics of the New York Jets that are different now than they were when the Bills played in Week 9. And then just talk about what the Bills need to do to win this ball game. And so in some ways, it'll feel just like our normal primer, and in some ways, it'll feel a little bit different just because it's the second game against this team in a relatively short amount of time. Real quick, before we get fully into the weeds here on the Jets, shout out to the Bills backers of Park City, Utah, for the hat that I'm wearing right here. Got a chance to meet them at the game that I was at, the Sunday night game against the Packers in Buffalo. And they gave me a couple of hats and a bottle of bourbon, and it was really cool to meet those folks. And thank you for being so kind. All right, let's get into the nuts and bolts here. The Bills are back at home, Week 14, for a date with the Jets. The game will be played on Sunday, December 11th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time at Highmark Stadium in Orchard Park, New York. The game will be broadcasted on CBS. Jim Nantz on the play-by-play, Tony Romo, the game analyst, and Tracy Wolfson, the sideline reporter. So the Bills get the best crew, right? The lead crew for CBS on Sunday. This will be the 125th all-time meeting between the Bills and Jets. The Bills lead the series with a 67-57 record against the Jets. And, of course, the last time that these two teams played was Week 9. The Jets won the ball game. Couple of Josh Allen turnovers. He hurt his elbow at the end there. And the Bills are looking to even things up this year when it comes to the matchup with the Jets. The Bills enter this game 9-3. The Jets are 7-5. Since playing the Bills, the Jets have gone 1-2. They had a 10-3 loss to the Patriots. And then after that game, Zach Wilson, the quarterback, got benched. And then they played 2 games with Mike White as their starting quarterback, who will be the starting quarterback on Sunday and presumably for the rest of the season. And the results of those 2 games with Mike White were a 31-10 win over the Chicago Bears, keeping in mind the Bears didn't have their starting quarterback that day. Justin Fields was injured. And then last week, they lost to the Vikings 27-22. So let's talk about this Mike White, who is now the Jets quarterback, stepping in for the benched Zach Wilson. And what's really funny about this Zach Wilson dynamic is I went into that game against the Bills a few weeks ago, and I talked all about how Zach Wilson is struggling. He's not running the system. He's playing too off script and not playing enough in between the lines, if you will. And then he goes out against the Bills and does everything I said he couldn't do. And you're like, wow, Zach Wilson just played the game of his life against the Bills, and he's corrected his issues. Well, it took one more game against the Patriots for him to get benched, and now Mike White's the starting quarterback. So I felt super weird about that whole thing where I got on this podcast, and not just this podcast, the Draft Dudes podcast, my other one, WGR. I do a weekly segment there, 8 a.m. on Wednesday mornings, other media stuff that I did where I really went in on Zach Wilson. And then Zach Wilson goes out there and does everything I said he couldn't do. Well, it didn't take long for him to revert to the player I told you he was, and he's benched. So Mike White, the quarterback for the Jets, 27 years old. He's 6'4", 218 pounds, a fifth-round pick in 2018 out of Western Kentucky by the Dallas Cowboys. He was on the Cowboys for one season, 2018, and then he didn't make the team in 2019. He got cut before the season, and he was signed by the Jets to the practice squad where he stayed until basically last year. And then he winds up starting 3 games last season. He appeared in 4 games. One of those 3 starts was against the Bills, where he went 24 of 44 for 251 yards and threw 4 interceptions. And then a few weeks later, they got Zach Wilson back, and Mike White went to the bench. He started so far 2 games this season, has completed 53 of 85 passes. That's a completion percentage of 62.4, 684 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and a passer rating of 89.5. And so far, he started 5 career games. The Jets are 2-3 with him as their starting quarterback. Now, I want to look at his metrics, but we'll do this just a tick differently than we typically do because we don't have a big, huge sample size of Mike White this year. We have 2 games. That's it. And so I want to talk about him, but not necessarily the same way that we normally do because I don't think it's really a good idea or representative of exactly who Mike White is to compare 2 starts from him to, 12, 13 or 11, 12, 13 from these other quarterbacks. So we will talk metrics, though. His average time to throw in those 2 starts is 2.47 seconds. And this is an important number because that's a really fast trigger. That's 4th fastest in the NFL over the last 2 weeks, specifically, just the last 2 weeks. That's what this Jets offense is. It's about getting the ball out of the hands of the quarterback and into the hands of playmakers, and that requires a quick trigger. That 2.47 seconds is everything they wish Zach Wilson would do consistently. Mike White runs the system. That's what he does. That's all they're asking him to do. Keep it between the lines and run the system. And that's what he's giving this offense. The ball comes out quick. His average depth of target is 7.8 yards. That's middle of the pack. 9.4% of his attempts are 20-plus yards down the field. That's very low, 27th in the NFL. Mike White's not a big toolsy quarterback that can really, rock the ball down the field with consistency, especially when his really what he wants to do is just get it out of his hands very quickly. So far on his deep attempts, he's 3 of 8, 63 yards, a touchdown, and an interception with a passer rating of 66.1. Play action happens 28% of Mike White's dropbacks. That's middle of the pack. The splits are better when he does have play action, so he enjoys that component of throwing the football. And he gets it out pretty quick even when there is play action. So he wants to hit that fake, hit the back of his drop, and get the ball out of his hands. 14.6% of his passes are screens. That's an extremely high number, 5th in the NFL. And so this is a system right now that is reliant on yards after catch. 410 of Mike White's 684 passing yards have come via yards after the catch. Huge, huge percentage. They want to get the ball out of his hands and into the hands of playmakers. Now let's talk about his pressure and blitz splits here. If you look at the numbers through 2 games, the splits are going to tell you that he's very good under pressure and against the blitz. But here's the important variable that you need to be mindful of. He has the lowest pressured rate in the NFL in his 2 starts over the last 2 weeks. Very, very little pressure he's faced. Why? Because he gets the ball out of his hands. He hits the back foot and throws the ball. So I wouldn't expect a whole lot of sacks or pressure on Mike White because, to be honest with you, and I think we learned this last year in his start against the Bills, is that Mike White would rather throw an interception than get sacked. The ball comes out quickly. So hopefully this conversation has painted the picture for the quarterback the Bills are facing on Sunday. And in just a moment, we're going to talk a little bit more about the offense and my keys for Buffalo against Mike White in this Jets offense. But this quarterback comes in and plays a very different style of game than Zach Wilson, notwithstanding the one game that Zach Wilson played against the Bills where he did all the things that the Jets wish that he would do with some level of consistency, but he's not been able to be that quarterback in the NFL, where Mike White, a guy that maybe he hasn't played a ton of football, but he's been in the league since 2018, and he will do the thing that is hit your back foot and throw the ball. Today's episode is brought to you by Turo. Turo is the world's largest car-sharing marketplace. With Turo, you can book any car that you want, wherever you want it, from a community of local hosts. You can browse a huge selection of vehicles for just about any occasion or budget across the U.S., UK, Canada, and coming soon to Australia. You can book a spacious SUV or minivan for a family road trip. You can get a classic or luxury car for a special event, birthday, or holiday. Or you can find an affordable economy car if you're on a budget and you just need to get from A to B. You can test drive that new electric vehicle you've had your eye on, and you can evaluate how it fits into your everyday life. And many Turo hosts can even deliver the car right to you. Every trip is backed by liability insurance. Terms, conditions, and exclusions apply. Forget boring rental cars and find your drive at Turo.com. So let's look a little bit deeper into this Jets offense against the Bills defense. Number one, Mike White is the quarterback. We've already talked about that. Number two, at running back, Michael Carter, who torched the Bills in week 9. That dude had over 6 yards on average after contact per rush. The Bills had a lot of trouble with Michael Carter in that first matchup. Well, he's been banged up, and so has James Robinson. Michael Carter was doubtful last week against Minnesota. Not sure what his status is for Sunday. But Bam Knight has stepped into this offense as the lead back over the last couple of weeks and played well. He's a rookie. He's a UDFA out of North Carolina State, player I was very familiar with at NC State. I thought he was a really good college player. Tough, competitive runner. I mean, really physical runner. He's one of those guys that runs angry and really packs a punch when you try to tackle him. He's got some big playability, had a big-time career at North Carolina State as a kick returner. He catches the ball well. And he's done those things in 2 starts for the Jets. The number 2 has been Ty Johnson, who's been productive as a runner and a receiver as well. So this is one of those offenses, right? The Shanahan tree where it just doesn't matter who the running back is. You just plug them in, and they seem to have production. Now, there's different levels of dynamic ability that, they'd love to have Breece Hall, who's out for the year, and certainly Michael Carter brings a lot in terms of elusiveness, but the scheme's really, really good in terms of running the football, and there's a lot of cutback opportunities, and it puts stress on you to maintain your run fits and work laterally and play downhill, and it's a lot to deal with. And so maybe they won't have Michael Carter and James Robinson, but they will have Bam Knight and Ty Johnson, and those guys have been productive over the last 2 weeks. Their wide receivers, Garrett Wilson is blowing up. The rookie out of Ohio State, 162 receiving yards last week against the Vikings. In Mike White's first start against the Bears, he had 5 catches for 96 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's becoming their go-to guy, and he's producing. Very good after the catch, has speed. Really nice young player. And then Corey Davis is healthy, and he's that veteran in the room who brings some toughness, some yards after catch, that willingness to work the middle of the field. He's available. They've got Elijah Moore, young, shifty player. Braxton Berrios, who's that cerebral slot guy. And then Denzel Mims, who doesn't catch a ton of footballs, but has been a really good blocker for them, which is a staple of that Shanahan-style offense. Their tight ends, Tyler Conklin, CJ Uzoma, they're still quality veterans, especially Tyler Conklin. But the point here with all these weapons, all the receivers that I mentioned, the 2 running backs, the 2 tight ends, Mike White is spreading the ball around. Now, it's mostly going to Garrett Wilson and then Corey Davis, but those running backs both have 9 targets, and Tyler Conklin has 9 targets. They're sprinkling in everybody here. And so it's not that it's an impossibly deep group of weapons to deal with. Now, I think they're more talented than New England. I talked about this last week with the Patriots where, hey, maybe they don't have a true go-to guy, but they spread it around. Well, the Jets spread it around, but they've got some dynamic talent here like a Garrett Wilson, like Corey Davis, who was a top 5 pick for the Titans, like Elijah Moore, who's just a really shifty, dynamic playmaker. So they've got a go-to guy now in Garrett Wilson with some dynamic players around him. So just a lot to account for with this offense. Now, lasering into the last 2 games that they've had with Mike White as their starting quarterback, they scored 31 points against the Bears, 22 against the Vikings. And I think it's important to note that those are 2 terrible defenses, especially the Vikings. I mean, the Vikings barely have a pulse on defense. They've gained 466 yards against the Bears, 486 against the Vikings. Those are big-time numbers. Over 300 yards passing in both games, 308 against the Bears, 366 against the Vikings. They're running the football well, 158 yards against the Bears, 120 against the Vikings. So they've done pretty well. They didn't turn the ball over at all against the Bears. They had 2 against Minnesota, which is why they lost the game. But Mike White has come in and elevated the offense. A much more dynamic passing game situation because he's getting the ball into the hands of playmakers that are good with the ball in their hands, and they're still running the ball well. And I think it's important to note that their offensive line is getting healthy. They don't have Elijah Vera Tucker, but their other 4 preferred starters are in the lineup. Dwayne Brown, veteran left tackle. Lincoln Tomlinson, their big free agent signing from the 49ers. He struggled earlier in the season. He's coming along at left guard. Connor McGovern, who's been there for a while at center. Right guard, Nate Herbig. This is the guy that is not the preferred starter here, and that should be your opportunity to win some matchups. And then right tackle George Fant is back and healthy in the lineup. So what's different about this unit is Mike White's a quarterback, and for this Jets team, he's not more talented than Zach Wilson. He's not. But he keeps the car between the lines. That's all they want him to do. Corey Davis being healthy, that's different. And, of course, their offensive line stabilized. And then we'll see what happens at running back. So what are my keys for the Bills on defense against this Jets offense? Number 1, take the air out of routes. Take the air out of routes. They want to get the ball out of Mike White's hand quickly. Rely on yards after catch. You need to be able to quickly close and trigger and not allow a lot of cushion. Don't make those easy throws easy. They love free access. So how can you get creative, whether that's being willing to kind of play up in the face of receivers? Maybe it's being creative with some of your work that you've done in advance of this game to understand some of their tendencies and zone drop into some of those areas. Using Tremaine, Edmunds, and Matt Milano in their range and coverage. Take the air out of routes. They want free access. They want quick completions. They want yards after catch. Well, you got to take that away from them. Number 2, rush 4, play zone, break on the football. There's no sense in committing extra pass rushers against a quarterback that's going to throw the ball immediately and would love for nothing more than to replace the blitz with the ball and make you pay for that. So rush 4, defensive lineman, you're probably not going to get there. He's going to get the ball out quick. So get your hands up in the air and try to bat some balls down. And that defense needs to be quick to trigger and play on the football. Mike White will give you some interceptions. But you got to be willing to drive and make a play on the ball. And then number 3, you just got to tackle. That's what killed the Bills against the Jets. Killed them. Tackle. And Jaquan Johnson not starting at safety probably helps you there. But tackle, they're going to run the football. They're going to run screens. They're going to rely on yards after catch. If you tackle and don't give them all the bonus yards, you're going to have a really good chance of bottling up this offense. We'll talk more about the Jets defense against the Bills offense here in just a moment. But first, this episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number 1 source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From football to basketball to soccer and esports, we've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those as well at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. It's Bet Online, and it's where the game starts. All right, Jets D versus Bills offense. Up front, they've got a nice group of players. Quinnen Williams, one of the bright young stars at defensive tackle in the league. John Franklin Myers, an absolute, I think he's like a stalwart, just a really cerebral player, physical. He's kind of like Shaq Lawson. Good player. Carl Lawson has been healthy and making an impact. Sheldon Rankins, a penetration-style interior defensive lineman. And then some nice young players, some rookies this year. Jermaine Johnson, one of their first-round picks. He's been really good. He made an incredible tackle on Josh Allen. I don't think we're talking enough about that. I think he won him the game. That tackle where Josh was rolling right, and he got the angle and got him down. I've never seen Josh go down on that tackle. Won him the game. Like, low-key won him the game. Michael Clemens, draft pick out of Texas A&M, who's unbelievably physically gifted. He's made an impact, especially of late for this team. And then Bryce Huff, the guy that hurt Josh Allen's elbow, right? On that rush at the end of the game, he's been making an impact. So they're deep, and they rotate these defensive linemen, and they're making an impact. They got a lot of guys that you got to deal with. Hopefully Deion Dawkins can go this week. On the second level, C.J. Mosley and Quincy Williams, they're playing good ball. I think they've gotten better as the season has progressed. Maybe everything's not perfect all the time, but I think they've played pretty well this year. And like I said, they've gotten better as the season has progressed. Secondary's been really, really solid. The rookie Sauce Gardner at one corner, DJ Reed, his running mate, they're really doing a great job at outside corner. And Michael Carter has been an absolute find for them at slot. A couple of veterans in Jordan Whitehead and LaMarcus Joyner at safety. This defense has been terrific all year long. 6th in scoring defense, 4th in yards per game. They've been terrific. In the 3 games since they played the Bills, and I'm going 3 games here and not the 2 for the offense because I only care about the 2 games where Mike White was a starting quarterback, but 3 games defensively are 3 games defensively. They held the Patriots and the Bears to 10 points. They held the Vikings to 27. So those 3 games specifically, none of those 3 teams, none of them topped 300 yards of offense. They've allowed more than 225 passing yards to a team once this year. Once. And that was to the Bengals in week 3, who got 261. 7 of the 12 games the Jets have played this year, they allowed under 200 yards passing. I mean, this pass defense is legit. They're very good in terms of rushing the passer. I think they're top 5 in pressure rate. I mean, opposing quarterbacks have like a 77 rating against this defense. They're allowing under 5 adjusted net yards per attempt. I mean, it's a good defense. There's no way to spin it other than that. It's a really good unit. So what are my keys for the Bills on offense against the Jets on defense? Number 1 is the balanced attack like we've seen lately. Mix in the run, mix in the pass. I think that's going to be important. I think you can run the ball a little bit on this team. The Bills didn't have much success the first time, but I think if you could put some more stress on them with how the Bills run game has evolved, that's going to be really helpful. Number 2 is make them defend the entire field. They want to space the field. They want to play zone. Use your ability to stress the teams vertically and horizontally. You have speed horizontally in Isaiah McKenzie and Nyheim Hines and James Cook. And you got the ability to win down the field with Josh Allen as your quarterback. I would stress them in every imaginable way to open up some of those creases, to make those corners think twice about driving on routes, to have your zone beater route combinations in place to stress them and how they're going to space the field and layer coverage. You have to put maximum stress on that. And you can do that because you have Josh Allen as your quarterback who makes you play defense against 11 players because the threat of Josh Allen running the ball and how far he can throw it. So this is the type of week to do it all. Do it all. In some ways, what you saw in the Patriots game where you saw some motion going, you saw Nyheim Hines going on some wheel routes and some some jet motions and stuff like that. You need that going this week. Stress them to communicate. Stress them to communicate by utilizing everything at your disposal. Number 3 is involve the backs in the passing game. This is a game where I'd love to see 8, 10 passes to running backs. Maybe more. That's going to open up the spacing. That's going to cause those linebackers to think twice about getting more depth in their drops to take away the middle of the field or to squeeze on Steph Diggs or something like that. Involve the backs in the passing game. And number 4 is, I should have said this at number 1, but take care of the football. We'll talk about it every week probably. The Jets have only forced 1 turnover in the last 3 games. They've only created multiple takeaways 3 times this season. So don't give them the ball. Don't give them the ball. But if Josh Allen goes out and plays like Josh Allen can, and I think the Bills will be all right in this one. But it's a tough task because of a really good defense and an offense that has been stabilized by a quarterback that is just running the system. You know, the Bills are going to be hungry to right the ship here and not drop 2 games to the Jets in a season. But that's what's at stake on Sunday. The Bills control their own destiny. All right. Well, that includes beating the Jets on Sunday. You do that, you're going to be in good shape heading into that Miami game the following week. So a couple of really important home games in the division here over the next couple of weeks. We got more to talk about with this Jets game. We'll have our crossover discussion with John Butchko, the host of Locked On Jets, coming for you tomorrow. Very excited for him to provide us his analysis on Mike White and this offense, and you know how he's preparing for this game and what his expectations are. So that's coming your way tomorrow. Don't miss it. Make sure that you're subscribed. We'd love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow.